Hi, you're on Legends of the Old West channel. It's where forgotten stories of the Wild West come to life. Subscribe, give it a like. It helps the channel grow and share even more unique stories with you. Now, get ready. This story will not leave you indifferent. It starts at dawn, the cold, the loneliness, and the unexpected meeting that changed two lives forever. The ground shook beneath his feet as Targi walked down the slope toward the valley. His shadow was long, like a hunter who had gone too far. 2 days of travel behind him. In his eyes, a tired, sleep-deprived ache. His brother had died a month ago, killed by a drunken soldier at Fort Wingate. No one had been punished for it. But Targi didn't go for revenge. He went into the canyons to talk to the spirits. He went back to his Hogan, a house built by his father's hands, smelling of cedar wood and the ashes of old fires. The silence of the prairie was deceptive. Beyond the horizon, the white man's world was stirring again. Settlers were pushing the boundaries, greedily, rudely, without looking back, closer and closer to the tribes. There was a scent of dust, sage, and something unsettling in the air. He stopped for a moment. Instinct warned. Something was wrong. The sky was clear, and the sun was just beginning to rise, coloring the earth bronze. But this morning felt like someone else's breath. He clutched the amulet of coyote bone in his hand. His brother wore it around his neck.
Can you feel it?
He whispered, as if addressing the wind.
Someone was here.
He headed toward his dwelling, not yet knowing what awaited him inside. Not a beast, not an enemy, but a pale, dusty figure. A girl with a face scratched by branches, a wounded leg, and a story that only dawn would bring. Their meeting was not meant to be, but it was inevitable. On the same morning that Targi felt the presence of an uninvited spirit at his Hogan, an old wagon with rickety wheels arrived 100 miles to the east in a township called Colt Ridge. From it jumped a young woman, wearing a shabby raincoat, a suitcase in her hand, and a slight limp on her left leg. Her name was Evelyn May. The sign outside the station was scratched out, Colt Ridge. Population 217. Don't linger in vain. She looked at the place, dusty, grey, unfriendly, and reminded herself she had a reason to be here. She answered an ad in the paper. Hard-working farmer seeks wife. Accommodation provided. It seemed to her that this would be a start. Hope. A new home after her father's death and a long journey halfway across the country. She was greeted by a tall man in a faded hat. His face was as dry as cracked earth. He didn't smile.
Are you Evelyn?
He asked without giving me his hand.
Yes, Evelyn May from Spring Creek. I wrote to you.
The man ran his gaze over her figure, from her worn boots to her limp.
You didn't tell me you had a leg.
I didn't think I needed to.
She said carefully.
It doesn't stop me from working. I sew, I cook, I can milk. I'm strong.
The man didn't answer, just nodded, turned and walked away. Didn't offer his hand, didn't help her with her suitcase.
Hey,
She called out.
mine is Mr. Hunt. What about the lodgings?
He didn't even turn around. His voice came from somewhere over her shoulder.
I changed my mind.
And so he disappeared into the dusty street. Evelyn stood among the crates, looking around the village. People were passing by. Women, wrapped in shawls, looked at her askance. Men spat under their feet, as if she were just another loser, as they often did here. She walked around 3 houses, asking for shelter for the night. One owner closed the door right in front of her face. Another woman shouted,
We need our own here. Go to the railroad.
When the sun went below the horizon, Evelyn sat behind the barn near the empty warehouse. She tucked her coat under her, hugged her knees. The wind came in gusts, tearing her hair from her face, bringing the smell of wet straw and something else, disturbing, as if the earth itself didn't want her here. She did not cry. Her lips trembled, but her gaze remained straight. She had lived too much misery to weep over humiliation. There was frost in the night. She could hear sheep bleating in the stable, dogs barking somewhere. but no one called her inside. At dawn, she stood up, wobbly, leaning on a stick. Her toes were numb. She walked past the houses that would not welcome her, past the store where the window was empty, and stepped away from the road, into the steppe. Walked without purpose, guided by something unclear, maybe desperation, maybe intuition. She didn't care where she was going, as long as it was away from people, from their cold eyes and empty promises. And somewhere out there, in the same steppe, Targi was already preparing a morning potion of wormwood. Soon their paths would cross. But for now, it was a story of two lonelinesses. The steppe stretched to the horizon. The grey sky pressed down like a coffin lid. Evelyn walked farther and farther, groping, as if she hoped that the earth itself would accept her if the people rejected her. Her legs shook treacherously. Her fingers struggled to hold the suitcase. She walked until her body began to give up, from pain, from cold, from hope. Suddenly, a low building appeared ahead, almost blending into the ground. Walls of clay and wood, roof like a dome, covered with turf. Hogan. A dugout that nature itself could have built. She came closer. The door was not locked, just a deer antler hanging over the entrance, like a sign she didn't understand, but she had no strength left to guess. No strength left at all. Evelyn stepped in. Inside was warm from the dying embers in the hearth. It smelled of dried herbs and smoke. She knelt down on her knees, then on her side, right by the hearth. Her cheek touched the warm earth. One last thought, I live, and darkness. When Targi returned, the sun was already setting. He carried yucca roots in a sack and fresh game. But as he approached the Hogan, he froze. Footprints, small, uneven, female. He entered quietly, like a hunter. He saw her at once, sleeping by the fire. A stranger, white. His hand involuntarily reached for his knife, but he stopped. He came closer. She slept like a child with her leg tucked up. Her cheek burned from the wind. Around her neck was a locket, silver, with a prayer engraved on the underside. He didn't know the words, but he felt the meaning. He saw her fingers trembling even in sleep. She was not an enemy. She was a fragment of something broken. He watched for a long time. Then he took an old coyote hide and covered her. He put a wooden bowl of warm wormwood tincture beside it. He sat down by the wall, cross-legged, staring into the fire. Targi did not believe in coincidence. If the spirits had brought this woman here, they had a reason. He did not sleep. He waited. The morning entered Hogan with a chill. The light was dim, soft, as if shy. Evelyn opened her eyes and for a moment did not realize where she was. The ceiling was earthy, dark. The air smelled of smoke and herbs. She was lying under a hide by the hearth, and only after a second did she notice. There was a man sitting in the corner. He was as still as a statue. His facial features were sharp, as if carved from wood. His hair was braided into two dark braids. His eyes stared straight into the flames. No fear, no surprise, only silence. Evelyn cried out softly, sat up, threw off her pelt.
I'm sorry. Yeah, I didn't know anyone lived here.
Her voice trembled. The man didn't move, only slowly turned his head toward her.
I'm going to leave now.
She added hastily.
It's just, I needed a place to spend the night.
He nodded. Not a word. Just a nod, like a sign that he understood. She jumped up, pulled on her ragged coat, fumbled for her suitcase, grabbed it with trembling fingers, and walked to the door. Pulled it open. Outside. And stopped. On the hill in front of the Hogan, in the morning gloom, stood two wolves. One black, the other grey. They didn't growl, didn't lunge. They just watched. Too close, too long.
Jesus.
Evelyn whispered. She backed away, swung the door open again, and slipped inside. Closed it behind her. He looked up, silently.
There are wolves.
She exhaled fearfully.
They're right at the entrance.
He said nothing, only gestured. Sit. Then he touched the floor, pointed at her. Then he pointed to himself. The gesture was simple. Stay here. Bye. She froze. Slowly, she sank to the floor by the hearth. Silence again. Only the crackling of the fire. Targi rose, took a thin flatbread from the corner, broke it, handed her half of it. Then, the bowl of infusions. She took it gingerly, as if it were not food, but trust.
Thank you.
She said quietly. He didn't answer, just sat back down. They ate in silence. He ate like a warrior, confident, measured. She ate like someone who hadn't known the taste of food in a long time. With each sip, her body began to warm, her mind clearing. He didn't look at her, wasn't studying her, just being there for her, as if his silence was a shield, not a cold. Evelyn felt, for the first time in a long time, that no one was expecting her to make excuses. No one demanding that she be strong or beautiful or needed. She just hadn't been driven away, and that was already too much. Night covered the land with thick darkness, but the hearth in the Hogan was warm and bright. Evelyn, barely warmed, was the first to speak, her voice quiet and fragile, like a crack on a thin pane of glass.
My name is Evelyn.
She began, staring at the dancing flames.
I was running from the past, from those who didn't want to see me as I am. My legs aren't as strong as I'd like them to be, but I'm still walking on.
Targi was silent. His eyes stayed fixed on the fire, but he listened to every word. There was no pity or judgment in his gaze, only deep understanding.
I too know what it is to lose.
His voice was suddenly low and hoarse, as if the words were torn from the depths of his soul.
I was a prisoner of foreign hostile tribes. I've lost my family, my people, and myself.
He slowly opened his shirt, revealing the deep scars on his chest and arms, the marks of battle, pain, and survival.
These scars are my memory.
He added.
They remind you that even when the world is falling apart, you must stand.
Evelyn looked at him differently, not just as a silent protector, but as a man with a hard fate like her own. Her heart clenched with unexpected gratitude.
Thank you for not kicking me out.
She said, her voice trembling.
Thank you for giving me a chance to be here.
Targi nodded. Then from his belt he pulled out a thin, sacred ribbon, a strip of cloth with patterns he'd never shown anyone. He placed the ribbon on the ground in front of the fire.
You came into my house.
He said for the first time, and his voice sounded like an ancient oath.
Then you are part of it.
Evelyn lowered her eyes, feeling the depth of the words the ribbon carried. She knew there was a whole world of tradition and power in those simple gestures. Targi reached up, took her hand, and wrapped the ribbon around both of hers.
It is a sacred silence,
He said.
a ceremony. It speaks more words than 1,000 songs.
They sat like that, silent, united by the ancient rite, as night drew nearer to dawn and the first rays of sunlight softly penetrated the Hogan. Now they were not just strangers. Now they were family. With the first rays of the sun, the life in the Hogan awakened with them. Evelyn stood by the small hearth, trying to rekindle the fire that Targi had once made for her. Her hands were not yet deft at it, but they grew more confident with each attempt. Targi, sitting nearby, watched silently. His gaze was stern but patient. He did not interfere with them with words, but showed them how to hold the knife, how to cut the roots carefully, how to distinguish between edible herbs. His hands explained more than words could. Evelyn listened and learned, not just how to survive, but how to live in harmony with nature and herself. She gathered herbs, sewed new clothes from her hide, cooked the humble meals they shared. Her every gesture was filled with care. She cooked the food with love, carefully sewed up the gaps in Targi's clothes, even sang quiet songs that reminded her of home. Targi reciprocated. One day, sitting by the fire, he pulled a thin knife from his belt and began carving a pendant out of wood, an intricate pattern that symbolized their destinies. He gave it to Evelyn, and the first sincere smile sparkled in her eyes. She, in return, sewed him a shirt of coarse cloth, taking care of every detail. In that moment, something more than a union of necessity was born between them. Respect, understanding, and something close to tenderness grew. But far beyond their seclusion in the township, life was not so quiet. The women gathered at the well, whispering and casting oblique glances toward the step. "The cripple has run away to the savage," they said reproachfully. The men talked among themselves, discussing that this union would do no good, that it was a disgrace to their community. Rumors grew like fire in the wind, but in the Hogan, Targi and Evelyn heard only silence, filled with understanding and the beginning of a new life. Their world was on the edge of two eras: civilization and wilderness, pain and hope, loneliness and union. They looked at each other in silence, knowing that together they could withstand any challenge. Heavy clouds covered the evening sky, and a cold wind howled viciously between the bushes. Muffled voices echoed in the Hogan, disturbing the usual calm. Two men, hunters from a neighboring village, stepped to the threshold, their faces stern and their eyes full of distaste. Rifles were clutched tightly in their hands.
"Evelyn must return to the village. That's an order,"
the older of the two men said, voice hoarse and harsh.
"She's a stranger here."
Targi rose silently, setting his wife's body before him. There was an icy fire in his eyes, like a steppe wind that could not be tamed.
She is with me.
Targi said in a low, hard voice.
"You are nothing more than a wild beast,"
grinned the other.
"We will not let you take her."
Targi's gaze didn't waver. He stepped forward and placed a hand on the shoulder of one of the hunters. The tension felt intense, as if the very ground itself was preparing to explode.
Go, before I get angry.
The hunters exchanged glances, but realized that force would not solve the matter. They drew cartridges from their rifles and walked away with quiet threats without another word. As the door slammed shut, Evelyn knelt by the hearth. Bitter tears streamed down her cheeks, the trembling never leaving her body.
"I'm afraid, Targi. I don't want to be alone and without a home again,"
she said, voice weak and frightened. Targi sat down next to her, hugged her tightly around the shoulders as if he wanted to convey strength and reassurance.
They will come,
he said quietly.
but I will stand behind you like a wall.
The night was thickening, but thoughts of the coming battle kept the mind at ease. Targi carefully gathered his belongings, about to leave to scout. Then Evelyn squeezed his hand tightly and spoke firmly.
"I was nothing before you. I'm whole now. I'm not going anywhere without you."
Her words penetrated the warrior's heart, lighting his inner world brighter than any campfire. He lifted his eyes, and in them flashed respect for the one who had become not just a wife, but an equal, fighting beside him. Targi nodded, pulling her tightly against him.
You are my family forever.
Outside, the wind whistled louder and louder, foreshadowing the battle that would decide the fate of the two on the border of worlds. Night descended in a thick blanket, thickening the shadows around the Hogan. The wind howled like a harbinger of trouble. Evelyn sat by the fire, hands clasped tightly in her lap. She heard a muffled noise, footsteps, voices, then the crackle of burning wood far away at the edge of their land. They've come, she thought, and her heart clenched with fear. For the first time, she couldn't run away, limp, vulnerable. She was bound to this place, to Targi, to his house. Targi appeared at the door, eyes intense, lips tight. He said nothing, just grabbed her hand and held it tight. His eyes read determination and worry.
Are you afraid?
He asked quietly. Evelyn nodded, unable to utter the words.
You are not alone,
he said firmly.
We will be together.
His voice, low and sure, like an anchor in a storm, made her relax a little. She looked up at him, a rugged warrior with deep scars on his face and body, who showed his vulnerability for the first time. Suddenly, there was a shout behind the Hogan. Fire! And tongues of flame soared into the night sky. The Hogan went up in flames. Targi grabbed Evelyn in his arms. She felt his strong fingers clutching her shoulders, his body pressed against hers as if saying without words, I will protect you." She fell, her leg treacherously failing her. Tears, not from pain, but from fear, dripped down his shirt.
Hold on.
He barked, lifting her higher. They ran along the rocks, hiding from the flames and the anger of the men who had come to destroy their lives. Each breath seemed heavier than the last, but he didn't let her go. In the silence of the cliffs, away from the fire and anger, they crouched down, pressing against each other. Evelyn could hear her own heart. The trembling in her body gradually subsided.
Why are they doing this to us?
She asked, not taking her eyes off the night sky. Targi remained silent, then whispered, "Because fear and hatred are stronger than understanding." She snuggled into his shoulder and felt him shiver, not from the cold, from pain and fatigue.
I'm afraid I'm going to lose you.
Evelyn admitted.
You're already with me, and no one will change that.
He replied, hugging her tightly. That night, two worlds, the Wild West and the tenderness of human souls, intertwined in the same breath, promising a new path traveled together. Day was turning to evening when Evelyn and Targi reached the tribe. She was no longer the frightened child who had once stepped out of the train car. Now there was a glow of confidence in her eyes and a calmness in her heart, gained through adversity. The elders greeted them with respect. One of them, a tall man with silver hair, approached Evelyn and spoke softly.
"You have passed through the fire, girl. Your name now is the one who walked through fire."
Evelyn felt that name woven into her soul like a new thread in the fabric of life. The days passed in work and study. Evelyn learned to weave baskets, make herbal remedies, and listen to the stories of the wind that the older women passed on. She watched Targi deftly chopping wood, building a new Hogan, the house that would become their fortress. His scarred hands worked with care and precision. He rarely spoke, but every look in his eyes was filled with deep concern. One evening, as the fire danced in the circle of their new home, Evelyn sat the baby on her lap. His little fingers grasped the air, trying to catch the flying sparks. Targi sat next to her, and there was a silence of understanding between them.
I was afraid I could never be a part of this world.
Evelyn said quietly.
But now I know I'm home.
Targi smiled, openly and warmly for the first time.
You are stronger than you realize. That fire you went through is inside you now.
They looked at the setting sun, and its light seemed a promise of new life. Not just survival, but true love and belonging. The baby, their living future, ran across the sand, making joyful sounds, filling the space around them with warmth and light. In that moment, two worlds, once separated by insurmountable barriers, merged into one. A new family, a new life, a new home. Evening had descended with a soft blanket, and the last rays of the sun were touching the horizon, coloring the sky with golden red hues. Evelyn and Targi sat by the fire, their faces illuminated by the warm light of the flames. The wind whispered among the trees, bringing with it calmness and the promise of a new beginning. Evelyn glanced at the man beside her and said quietly,
They called me lost. But you always knew I was the found one.
Targi didn't respond in words, but his eyes glowed with understanding and tenderness. The dawn that lay ahead of them was like their wedding dress, an invisible but most important symbol. This new day promised them to walk together through any challenge. In silence, with only the crackle of the fire and the light breath of night, two hearts merged in a single rhythm, the rhythm of love, trust, and hope. If you enjoyed this story, be sure to like, subscribe to the channel, and leave comments. I want to know what you think and what you'd like to see next. Thank you for being with us.